Thank you, Melanie. I'm so honored to be speaking with you both tonight. I want to make sure we have Elena up here on the screen, so I'm going to wait till we can see her actual face. There we go. And actually, before I ask the first question, as we just heard, and before we were all speaking a little before the audience came on, and we're able to see a couple of the amazing jackets of these 12 translations. You don't have to show us all of them, but I think if I were in the audience, I would really love to see a few of your favorite jackets of the wonders that have been published all around the world.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, first of all, I want to thank the Center for Fiction for the invitation and the Center for the Art of Translation. It's a pleasure to be here from Madrid by Zoom with you, Anna, and with Lizzie. And of course, thank you so much to all the Algonquin team. For me, it's really strange. I don't know if strange is the word to be like, these are my books, but I think it's as a publisher, the first impression of the book, it's really important, I think, because you can imagine what the book is trying to say to you. And if I, for example, this is the American book, it's American jacket. This is the British, and it's, for me, it's like for different kind of readers, I think, this and this. And this is a Spanish book. This is the French and the Dutch. And the Brazilian and the Portuguese. And this is also this, not the same language, because they are different translations, but I think it's very different books. And I have also my first bikini. This is my first book of poetry, my first book in English, and it was my first book with Lizzie.
How beautiful. And it's so tremendous to see. We're going to talk about my first bikini as well, a little bit down the line, but to see just how this book has been embraced. And I can say that it's a tremendous book, and it's so clear to me why so many people and publishers around the world have gotten behind it and created such beautiful and very different interpretations, let's say, if a cover can be called that. And just to put another plug in there for people to go buy this book right now or at some point tonight. It's really wonderful. And also to acknowledge that I think it's 1 a.m. where you are. Is that correct?
Yeah, 1 a.m. Yeah.
So for all of us who think that we're tired, let's just, bow down to Elena. I wanted to start with maybe a little bit of an unusual question, but a lot of the time when someone is doing, what I'm doing to sort of moderate a conversation like this, we start with a summary based mostly reiterating jacket copy, saying, this is what this book is about. And I can do that, and I will offer, my very brief summary would be, this book is about 2 women from 2 different generations. One is named Maria, one is named Alicia. They live in Madrid. And it's about their struggles to really at the core determine the course of their own lives, or maybe even figure out what it means to determine the course of their own lives. So that's my small attempt to do that. And it's easy to find more on that on the jacket copy, of course. But I'm very curious, because this book is so unusually rich and layered. When you were writing this book, I don't know if you can kind of put yourself back there, but when you were writing this book before, any publishers or marketers got their hands on it, and someone asked you, what are you writing about? What would you say? How would you describe it?
When I was talking with my agent, Maria, I always say that The Wonders is a book about money. I wanted to think about money, about how money defines our lives. I think if you got some money, you can you can get some achievements, you can get some things. If you got more money, you can get more things, more achievements. And if you got no money, maybe it's probably that you get no achievements and no things. It was like the I don't know how to say, like the first impression of the book. But when I was writing, I started to read the novel in March 7 years ago. For me, it's like really long in time, and I was like discovering the book while I was writing the novel. I wanted to think about money and to talk about money, about work, about precariousness. But when I was writing, I wasn't, for example, thinking about maternity. I was thinking about care, but not thinking about maternity. And when I finished the first draft, sorry, a friend of mine that she was reading like the draft of a chapter and the other draft of a chapter. She didn't read the novel from the first to the last chapter. She was reading like, well, I have finished this chapter, please read it and tell me about. She told me it's a novel about maternity, about mothers, about daughters, and it wasn't clear for me. It was like the novel was like telling me what the novel was about.
That's so fascinating. And it doesn't surprise me. I mean, I think that it's part of the gift of readership, right?
Mm-hmm.
Is that people are always along the way kind of showing us in new ways what we're writing about, or ways in which, we might have understood it to be one thing, and it is that, but it's also more, and readers make it more, and editors make it more, and translators make it more. And I was going to ask you specifically, there's this line, to come back to money. The very final line of the first chapter, this is a moment when there are thousands of women are taking to the streets in Madrid to protest in 2018. And the line, which is from Maria's point of view, is, you need money even to protest. And it's such a striking line and so central. And I wondered if you could talk a little bit specifically about the protests that you're writing about, like the real, the protests, but also sort of what that line means more broadly in the book. And you might have some thoughts about this too, Lizzie, I imagine, but yeah, can you start there?
Yeah, it was really, I think, when we think about the events that we live, maybe we think that they are like the center of the world. No? I was living, when you are living some, for example, this strike and this protest, I was thinking like I am living an historical moment. But I think that this strike was really a real historical moment. It was not. It wasn't egoist, I think. It was 4 years ago, in the 8th of March, the International Women's Day, and it was a really big strike in Spain. A lot of women stopped to work, and in the evening there were a lot of marches in every city of Spain. I was participating in Madrid's march from Atocha, from the station where Alicia works, and where Maria is participating in the march, to Plaza de España. It's really a really long distance from one point to the other, and it was really moving for me, because I was there working with my friends, and we were seeing women from all generations. We were receiving photos. For example, my mother and my little sisters, they were in Córdoba, and they sent me their photos in the march in Córdoba, and it was really. And I was thinking that we were participating in some important movement, and I felt in company, really a company. I don't know how to say, but in company of other women. I didn't know nothing about the women that were working with me, but I felt her like I felt them like my sisters, I think. It was really important. Unfortunately, I think it's now when I think, I am really very pessimistic, and when I think about that day, I think it's really difficult to repeat now. Not a cause of pandemic, a cause of pandemic, of course, but because I think it's really difficult to repeat like this energy. And I have the sensation I have this feeling in the march, but some days after, I was thinking about the women that they couldn't go to the march because they were working, and they were caring, they were like they maybe felt like I don't know, signal like, well, you are a feminist, we can, if for them maybe it will be a problem. And this this feeling in the book, no, this if you want to protest, you have to get money, maybe was born in these days after the march.
What you said to me sounded so right. The idea of company, the company of women, and that sense of sisterhood. And then also what you're speaking to, and sort of the limitations of who not just gets to call themselves a feminist, but you know, who this is available to, and the ways in which women are and aren't given access to that company, I guess would be one way of phrasing it. Thank you. I wondered if you would read to us very briefly so that people can get a feel for the book. There's a passage on page 16 from Maria's point of view, and Elena's actually going to read to us in the Spanish and then the English, so that we can hear both, which I think will be really lovely. And just provide, if there's anything you think people need to know. It's pretty early in the book, but if there's anything you think people need to know, feel free.
It's the excerpt that starts in her memory, the entire length. Okay.
Yeah, in her memory doesn't go inside that house.
Okay. En su memoria, la medida de Carmen encaja en sus brazos listos para recibirla. Hoy carga a su hija apoyándola en la cadera, porque el gesto aquel no basta. Le hace gracia, pensará María dentro de muchos años, que la memoria genere su ficción propia. Como lo que no se nos ha grabado porque lo consideramos insignificante o porque no satisface nuestras expectativas, lo sustituye aquello que quisiéramos que hubiese ocurrido. Durante el día cocina y limpia y plancha y obedece, pero por la noche se dedica a la memoria. Antes del sueño ensaya el plano de la casa de sus padres. Al entrar, un pequeño recibidor en el que colgar los abrigos, a la izquierda el dormitorio de sus padres, el cabecero de madera, la persiana bajada casi siempre, a la derecha el que compartía con sus hermanos Soledad y Chico, y antes con los más mayores, al fondo la cocina con la mesa grande, más allá el patio con el aseo, al principio un agujero en el suelo, el peso del cubo en la esquina rebosando de agua. No olvides vaciarlo primero y llenarlo después para quien te siga. Desmontaron su cama y el lugar lo ocupa ahora la cuna de la niña, la misma de sus sobrinos casi adolescentes, la misma de su hermano pequeño. Ya con los ojos cerrados se permite corregir algunas situaciones. No sube a ese autobús, no devuelve el saludo a ese hombre, no entra en esa casa.
Are you tired of reading? Do you want Lizzie to read the English? I see that you muted yourself.
I'm happy to read the English, Elena, if you'd like. All right. In her memory, the entire length of her daughter fits in her open arms. She's too big for that nowadays, and Maria carries her on one hip instead. It's funny, Maria will think many years from now, how memory generates its own fictions, how what hasn't stayed with us because we think it insignificant or because it doesn't align with our expectations gets filled in with what we wish had happened instead. During the day, she cooks and cleans and irons and follows orders, but she sets nighttime aside for memory. Before she falls asleep, she takes herself back to her parents' house, its layout. When you go inside, there's the small entryway for hanging coats. Her parents' room is on the left, the wooden headboard, the blinds almost always lowered. When the house was turned over to them, there was a living room in that space, and it's not hard for Maria to remember the hastily erected partitions. On the right is the room she shared with the siblings closer to her in age, Soledad and Chico, and in earlier times with the older ones. At the back, the kitchen with the big table, and beyond that, the backyard and the toilet, which originally had been a hole in the ground, the weight of the bucket in the corner, full to the brim with water. Don't forget to empty it first and fill it up after for whoever comes next. They took apart her bed, and the girl's crib now stands in its place, the same crib where her nieces, now nearly teenagers, slept, where her little brother slept. Now, eyes closed, she allows herself to revise certain moments. She doesn't get on that bus, doesn't say hello to that man, doesn't go inside that house.
I was muted. Thank you so much to you both. I think, I mean, it's so evident in that passage, as it is in every passage in the book, that to me, one of the great feats of this novel is that it has this, it's a novel, it feels totally gripping in its pacing and its plot, but it also feels actually meant to be read aloud. I think it has the sort of rhythms and precision of language of poetry, and you are a poet. And I wonder if you could talk a little bit about, I assume you're still writing poetry too, that you continued. Well, we can get to that, but I'm just wondering about what the transition was for you, what it was like for you starting to, and maybe you had done it before too, but really kind of opening up into prose and long form narrative.
In fact, I started to write fiction when I was a child. I think my story could be similar to other writers. I started to write like if I was playing short stories about my school or I was like I liked to off the TV, to turn off the TV and write like the final of the TV series. Like, yeah, I don't like the last scenes that of the script, and I decided to finish by myself. But when I was a teenager, I think I was 13 or maybe 13, I read some poems from Lorca, and it was like, wow, I didn't understand anything because it was in Lorca's Poet in Nueva York, Poet in New York. It was like really difficult poetry, but I was like, okay, I want to write in this language, because I think poetry is obviously a genre, but it's more like a literary genre. I think poetry is talks about the way of see the world it's for me, it's like a language. It's Spanish, poetry, French, English, and it's like the center of my writing. I could be writing essays or fiction, but I always think about, for example, the importance of being the importance like of the essence of the word. It's like if you can say something in 4 words, you don't need 10 words or 20 to say it. And also the importance of say no to some text. For example, if a chapter doesn't work, okay, but I will delete the chapter, and there's no problem. No? For me, it's like the lesson of poetry. If like, okay, if this poem doesn't work, it's not not a problem for me.
And I
That
think
is such an important lesson. Yeah, I wanted to go ahead, Lizzie, because I had a question for you, but I think just
no,
jump
that's
in.
fine.
No,
I
go
just
ahead.
wanted
Go
to
ahead.
say, I think that's how you fit, 3 generations into a 250-page novel, Elena, because you are able to evoke these 3 characters so fully. And it's amazing to me that the novel is actually so compact for the amount of history that it covers, and the geographical richness and the political richness. So I think that must be the editor in you and the poet.
Yeah, because for example, the first draft of the novel, it was like not the I think maybe 80 or 90 pages more, I think, because I wrote all there are 3 characters, two characters in the novel, Maria and Alicia, but there's a 3rd character, Carmen, that she hasn't like her own chapters, but I wrote them. I decided to delete all the I don't know how to say all her chapters, because I think the text doesn't work with her story. I prefer to like leave a space. Yeah, and I was like, okay, I have to put all and other chapters, because I think that if the reader like deserves a like our respect, no? If someone decides to read your novel or your book, you have to like give her or give him like the best book that you could write, I think.
And maybe
I love knowing that. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I'm sorry, Anna. No, I was just going to say that just trusting the reader to fill in those gaps and those omissions that were left when you took out Carmen's sections, and leaving that kind of mystery for the reader to solve. And go ahead now, Anna.
That's all I was going to say too. I mean, I've been thinking a lot recently about sort of the quality of absence, or the presence of absence, right, in fiction in particular. And I didn't know that you'd written a whole strand, a whole thread of Carmen's, and it makes sense to me now. And also makes sense to me that, I think when I think about the pleasure that I got reading the book of filling in that space, I say thank you. And I want to hear a little more from Lizzie too. So you actually translated Elena's poetry collection, which was published when you were 16, which means when you were 13, like, first writing poetry. I mean, it's just kind of bonkers. Obviously, you're from another planet than most of us, which is great. We want as many people from other planets as we can get on the Earth. But so I wonder, Lizzie, what it was like for you coming in, having worked with Elena on her poetry, to kind of enter this prose world, this very, anyway, just what your experience was encountering it.
Oh, yes, I love that question. I just think of little Elena at age 13 encountering Lorca for the first time, and then 3 years later, you have your own poetry collection, and it's brilliant. I don't know how you did that. But yes, so I was really lucky to get to work with Elena on my first bikini. It was actually her first poetry collection, my first translation. So that was really lovely and inspiring for me. And I think I was really eagerly awaiting the arrival of a novel from that moment on and hoping that I would have the chance to translate it. And there's so much poetry in this novel, but it manifests in a completely different way. Here, poetry, Elena, is just a very, well, shorter, obviously, but also really imagistic. We get these images that are just very concise and very self-contained. And in the Wonders, I feel like the poetry is in these extremely long flowing sentences, all of the subordinate clauses moving from inside of someone's head to kind of this omniscient narrative perspective in the span of a sentence, and that kind of polyphonic quality, and all of that is poetry too, but it's such a different kind of poetry than I had originally had the pleasure of collaborating on with you. So it was a really exciting experience just to see Elena's work manifesting in this different way, although thematically similar to the poems. So that was comforting.
Can you tell us, I don't know who wants to start, but a little bit about your process, how you work together? Some of us, like I've never worked with a translator. Anyway, I'm just, yeah. So how do you go about doing this? And I know you said, Elena, before that many of your translators you never speak with, right? Because there are languages you don't know, et cetera, et cetera. So yes, I'll ask it again. So how do you go about your process together?
Maybe Lizzie could start.
Sure, yeah, sure. Well, I do want to say also there was a third entity on this project, Thomas Bunstead, who is a British translator. And originally, I had submitted a sample to the British publisher, who was the first publisher to commission an English language translation, and they said, well, we really like it, but it doesn't sound British enough, so we need to bring someone on who can make it have, you know, the rhythms and the vocabulary of British English. And Tom did so much more than that. So I just want to say, just want to acknowledge Tom's translatorly prowess. But yes, Elena, I guess with my first bikini, I felt like I just needed to perfect everything before I shared it with you, or get as close to perfection as I could, because I was so nervous. But with this book, you know, however many years later, I feel we got to collaborate a lot more. Elena was so generous in sharing maps. I feel since place plays such a big part in the book, Elena actually mapped out the different locations where the characters live, and, you know, these public transit routes where they're doing all their thinking, and we're getting all of this this beautiful reflection, and sent me pictures and all sorts of things. I just felt like I was getting kind of to peek into this archive that Elena had developed while writing, which was so exceptional and not something that I've experienced with other projects as a translator. So I found our collaboration to just be very, I was always so pleased by Elena's generosity and attention and care. So thank you, Elena.
Well, I always, I think that every translator has their own way to work, and I have to I don't know how to, I have to trust in my translator. Because I think when you are reading and when you are translating, you are like rewriting the book, I think. I always say that maybe these are like my ideas, but mainly these are Lizzie and Thomas' ideas and words. I think this is their book. And for example, I new Lizzie, and we were talking about some questions, and I sent like my material because I need to my tradition is realism, and I searched a lot of information to be confident while I was writing. Like, well, I need to know that this could be possible in this day, in this year. And when I talk about Fanny Alexander, the film by Ingmar Bergman, I needed to know that this film were like projected in Madrid this day. Yeah, okay. I was like searching in the I don't know how to say hemeroteca of a news, the archive of a newspaper, and okay, it's possible. I sent like this kind of information to Lizzie. In fact, I always tell that there was a question about menú de vigilia. It's like the food that you can't eat if you are Catholic in I don't know how to say in English.
I don't even remember how we translated it because we had to talk about it so much.
Yeah, and I didn't know how to explain what menú de vigilia was.
Mm-hmm.
And I asked my mother, please, Mom, how can you explain this to a foreign? And my mother told me in a WhatsApp audio, like 2 minutes of, well, this is menú de vigilia. And I didn't send it to Lizzie, but I transcribed. I don't know how to say. I typed the audio and say, okay, my mother says this, because I think she can explain this better than me. It was like, well, I think it's a very, for example, with Lizzie and with Thomas, it was like a really close work, a really close relation, collaboration, yeah. And for example, I'm thinking about Susanne Lange, my translator into German. And Susanne, for example, I met her some years ago because she's the translator of Luis de Góngora, Miguel de Cervantes, like all the classic, all the Spanish classics. And I was in Germany in an event, and I was you have translated Góngora and you have translated Cervantes. And some years ago, she wrote me, and okay, I'm your translator into German. And for example, Susanne sent me a lot of questions about the translation, and in other languages, I never talked with the translator. Then I think like, well, I have to trust in their work.
I found that passage. It's
she
accidentally ate cooked meat on days when the Catholic calendar forbid it. So thank you, Elena's mother.
Wait, can you say that? Can you read that one more time, Lizzie? What is it?
Oh yeah, it was
going to be?
Now I've already lost it. It was any time that she ate cooked meat on days when the Catholic calendar forbid it, which I had no idea, but it's so much more concise in Spanish. So, as many things are.
It's amazing to see, you know, to kind of get a glimpse into the inner workings, just what you both offered. That's really, really fascinating. And as not surprisingly, an extraordinary amount of work and an insight into just like how rigorous the process is. Yeah, really interesting. I wanted just to let people know that in a few minutes, we'll turn to questions. So if you do have questions that have come up, please put them. There's a little at the bottom of the Zoom, there's a thing, probably everyone knows this by now, but anyway, it says Q&A. And if you put your questions in there, I'll choose questions from that, from those. So one thing I wanted to ask you about, along with money and motherhood and daughterhood, and it sounds like you also work with your mother in certain ways that, you know, or she makes her way into your books as well. Another really important theme that runs through the book is I think that you write about with a rare, not, sort of, frankness doesn't quite capture it, because many people write about it frankly. I'm talking about sex and desire, but also with a plainness, meaning like there isn't a whole lot of hoopla getting into it. It's just like, well, this is part of life too, so of course I'm going to be writing about it. And I really appreciated that. And I think we see both Maria and Alicia struggling to figure out what it means to get what they want in terms of their desires sexually, without sort of giving up themselves or something very important to themselves. And there's a line actually in this regard where the quote is, she said to herself, Alicia, if you want something, you have to give something up in return. And I won't give away what it's about, but to me, it's a pretty heartbreaking moment in a way in the book, once you come to love Alicia, which you do. And I wondered if you could talk a little bit about that and how you approached the subject and writing it.
Yeah. When I was writing my last book of poems, Chatterton, it was published like 8 years ago, I think. I was reading a French essayist, Eva Illouz. She's translated into English, and she talks about precariousness, not only economical, not only linked to work, precariousness like emotional, and she also speaks about like emotional capitalism. It's the way you think about your relations with other people, not only for, I don't know, for, because I think pleasure has another meaning in English, but not only for, okay, the feeling with being with other people, because you think about your relations, if these relations gave you something more, and not only material things. No, well, I'm her friend because she gives me, she's giving me a better job. She's giving me maybe some money, or because no, I am her friend because she's giving me like confident. And I think, yeah, stability. I think, for example, Alicia thinks about her relations with other people, especially with Nando, her husband, in this way. Okay, if I'm with her, I'm with him because he gives me stability, he gives me a home, he's helping me to find a better job, a better work. And for example, Maria refused that. She has a relation with Pedro, and Pedro talks with Maria like in economical terms. It's like he's negotiating with her in a moment of the novel, and it's like she refused this because she has another ideology different than Alicia, maybe another experience. I think, I don't know how Lizzie sees this.
Oh, I couldn't admire you more for writing about this, the way that these economic relationships and the social and emotional relationships end up shaping each other. And I think Elena is so willing to expose that in a way that we often want to ignore. And we see two very different manifestations of that in Alicia and Maria. I think that was one of the most compelling aspects of the book for me, was just that you aren't afraid to look there and to see how the economic is interacting with the intimate, and where those spaces overlap, which is everywhere.
Yeah, I'm glad you said it in that way too. I think that the willingness to name it, and I think that, I mean, and I think this may be changing, but even when it comes to writing about class, I think a lot of American writers are very behind in because of the myth that this country sort of that we live within, that we're raised within, that like, well, there is no real such thing as that because everyone can just pull themselves up by their bootstraps. That there's a lot of really sort of celebrated books in American literature that kind of ignore money to a large degree, and I think that in particular, that going a step further and allowing for these weavings of the personal and the emotional and the romantic with the financial, and you're right, it's something that we don't often see, and it's brave and it's very important, and it feels very true. It feels very true. So I also appreciate that. Just a reminder to people, you can put questions in the Q&A. We'll just keep talking here, but if I have my eye there, so if anything has come up, I wondered about, so I actually wanted to ask Lizzie. Oh wait, I see a question I want to give people. Oh, great question from Julianne for Lizzie. If it's articulable, what do you think is most important to you in how you approach capturing and translating style? It says, I think that's a accurate.
Yes. First of all, hello, Julianne. I miss you. Another Twin Cities friend here. So thanks, Julianne, for being here. Yes. I was so glad actually that Anna pinpointed something that I love about this novel, and that's that it almost demands to be read aloud, because I think in my approach to translating, I am very focused on sound actually, and I read everything out loud while translating many times, probably too many times. So I think that is something that I focus on a lot as a translator. And also I think tone, which is such a kind of nebulous thing to say, but that kind of ineffable aspect of the book and of the books. And with Elena, I think this was very challenging because she does write in this very style of realism, like very realism inspired texts, and I was not used to that as a translator. So having to render her dialogue and her scenes in a very realistic way without the kind of surreal and bizarre happenings that populate other translations I've worked on was a real challenge for me. I don't know if that answers, Julianne, but we can talk more next time we see each other.
That's really interesting, especially because I think that what I would have pinpointed, and this is from as sort of the core would be the book's lyricism. And so, but obviously where you had come from in your translations, it felt like it was sort of moving in the realist direction. And I mean, it is realist narration, but that would not have been the first sort of descriptor that I would have used to describe the style or the tone of the book. So that's really
Thank you. I think it probably speaks to the strangeness of my last few projects more than anything else. But
really interesting. We have a question from JT, which I think a lot of us are probably interested in. So how, this is more sort of the behind the scenes publishing, how do translations get commissioned is the question. Do translators pitch translations in addition to agents selling books to presses in other countries? And then an additional question is, does Elena have works that have not been translated yet? So why don't we'll start with the first thing, which is sort of like, how does it work?
I'm happy to answer that, or to try to answer that. As an editor also of translations, we get pitches from translators, we get pitches from agents. Sometimes the pitches from the agents have specific translators attached to them. Sometimes they do not. And it really kind of depends if you have the capacity on your staff to read in the original languages, which is a whole other challenge in terms of publishing translation. But we will get submissions from translators as well, including sample translations and summaries and synopses. And those are kind of the two routes. We get them from agents, and then we get them from translators. And let's see, what was the other part of the question? In addition to agents selling books to presses in other countries, Yes. So I think any house that is willing to publish translations would love to hear from translators. We rely on translators so much for kind of having an ear to the ground and bringing these projects to us. We're really, really grateful always as a press to have that. So JT, you can email me anytime. And Elena, untranslated work.
Yeah, I have, as Lizzie knows, I have two books of poetry more. A book for children that is translated into Russian. For me, it's an experience, and three books of essays about poetry.
Mm-hmm.
This is on my work, and yeah,
essays about poetry.
Yeah, essays about poetry. Yeah,
wow.
a book about a Spanish poet called Antonio Machado. A book about all like some main issues about poetry. Like I think the English title it will be like all you have to know about poetry. And now I'm like in May, in the last days of May, I will publish a third book of essays about classics in poetry. Yeah.
Amazing.
This raises so many more questions for me about like what do you sleep? But we don't need to ask.
Never. I never sleep.
She doesn't sleep.
Always answering emails.
There's another question which ties into something that I wanted to ask you about, which is that both of you work as editors, and you've mentioned this a little as we've gone, and it sounds like, I know, Elena, you actually are a publisher as well, right? Or you have started a publication.
Yeah, I have started to publish when I was 19. 19, yeah. Yeah, wow. It's like my publishing house this year, it's like 18 years. In Spain is,
my God.
Yeah.
I'm very curious to know how each of your work because Lizzie, you write as well, you write your own work, and how your work as editors, I do a bunch of editing, but I haven't edited in the way that you have like for publication, right? I sort of edit behind the scenes for people, but how your work editing for publication does or doesn't inform or make its way into your writing process. Is it something you have to protect yourself from, like your knowledge of the editorial process, or do you just pretend you don't know, pretend you don't know anything about it? How does that work for you?
Go ahead, Elena.
For me, editing is it's not a creative process, but it's a creative process. I think I think some of my ideas could finish not in my books, in the books that I publish from other authors, because I'm always thinking about, okay, how could we like resolve this problem? Okay, well, I have this idea, and an idea that I have for my own poetry, I gave to other author, and yeah, because you have some limited hours of like, I don't know how useful thinking, I think, and well, at the end of the day, I can't a lot of days I can't write my own poetry or write my own fiction, because I'm really tired, because I spend all day like not only working with books, with text, because I was like as a publisher I have to work with the text, but I also like make the book. I don't know how to say, design the book and talk with the library, with the libraries and with the bookshops, and do all the stuff. and I am really tired at the end of the day to write my own books. No, I always say that maybe not only about me. No, maybe we write not the books that we want to write. We write the books that we could write.
That
We
you're
can
able
write.
to.
Yeah.
And
Because I have time. I haven't time. I haven't mind to
yeah,
write
and
them.
I think I'm so glad you brought that up too, because I think the way that affected the structure of the Wonders is so
Mhm.
interesting. I mean, writing, having these short bursts of time to write, you have these beautiful vignettes that are moving us through decades of history, but such a different kind of writing than kind of one narrative start to finish. Which I'm grateful that was the book that you could write.
Thank you.
What about for you, Lizzie?
Oh, I forgot that was going to be.
You don't have to talk about it.
No, I think I agree with a lot of what Elena said. I do think of editing as a creative act, or at least an act that does require creative energy. And I feel both with editing and with translating that I'm so lucky because I get to try different voices on, I think every time I'm translating, I get to live in the mind of another writer, and that is so informative and enriching. So I think the same with editing too. So I think those are my most formative experiences as a writer too. So
did you speak or learn Spanish from a very young age, or when did you how did your relationship with Spanish evolve?
Yeah, so I was born and raised in Nebraska, but very luckily the public school system there offers Spanish language, or did at least, from kindergarten onwards. So that was very fortunate. And my grandparents are Italian. I was, trying to master Italian as a child. It was at least around. So I was very interested in Romance languages from a really young age and just kept at it. And here we are.
I really admire, I admire and this conversation makes me want to go try to learn a language I know some Spanish and I know some French, but just like, what would it be like to have access to the kind of capacity you have to enter both of those, both of the, because they become two texts, right? In a way, I mean, it's the same text, and it's also, as Elena was saying, sort of its own book, the translation. So what a gift to both be able to do it and then to be able to give it to us. I feel so privileged to have been, I was thinking about it as you were both talking, like, I feel so privileged to have been able to read this book.
Thank you so much. That's so kind.
Yeah, thank you.
We feel privileged that you read it.
Yeah.
No, it was a real pleasure, and I'm so glad that it's here, that it's available, and that hopefully it's going to find a lot of American readers and open eyes, and make more connections and more community, which I think feels very much at the heart of what you're doing. So I think we need to wrap up, correct? Melanie, will you come back and tell me if I'm doing the right thing? Okay.
Yes. Wow, thank you all. Thank you, Elena and Lizzie and Anna. It was such a rich conversation. If people hadn't bought the book yet, I'm sure they're rushing to do it now. It was great to hear all of you. And thanks to everybody who joined us this evening.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Perfection, Center for the Art of Translation, Anna, all of you, Algonquin, we're so lucky. And thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right. See you all again soon.
Bye-bye.